You guys sounded great today. Thank you. Very nice. Very impressive. Thank you for singing. So we've been going through this series. We are answering that question. Who are we? And really it all centers on the person of Jesus Christ. And we looked at that last week, and what a great story, right? About the Gadarene demonic, the man who was possessed by legion of demons. We don't know how many, but we know that 2,000 went into these pigs. So we know he was majorly possessed. And when Jesus comes to the shore of this place, the demoniac ran to him and bowed before him, because Jesus has all authority over anything. He's over it all. And he eventually, just a real long story short, cast this demon out. And remember, the worst part of the story, it went into pigs and down into the water, and all that bacon was wasted in the water. It's terrible, terrible part of the story, but it's just the reality of it. And so all the people were so freaked out by this, because this man was so possessed. He was so deep into the demonic that his eyes were wild. He would run around completely naked, terrorizing the community and cutting himself and abusing himself, and just a wild, howling man. And when Jesus came, Jesus, having authority over all of those spirits, cast that demon out. And when those people came back, there is that man. And I love what it says about him. It says he was seated, fully clothed, and in his right mind. That Jesus Christ has an ability to absolutely transform a life. Do you believe that? Do you believe he can do that in you? Do you believe that he can do that in other people? Because I do. I'm committed to that belief that Jesus isn't done with you. He's not done with me. He's got work to do, and he's going to use this body of believers in this community for this time to further his kingdom. And so we've been going through this purpose statement, this vision statement, which says the Bennington Bible Church exists to glorify God as we meet each person where they are with the love of Jesus, to rescue, restore, and rejoice. And we've been talking about restore for the last week. And we're going to talk about it this week. And we're going to talk a little bit about it next week. But we exist, you and I, to be part of the restoration process, that God wants to use us and that he can use us. That God would restore you, and that God would use you to be a restorer. I love the story about a man who taught mentally impaired teenagers. And these teenagers were really what a lot of people thought were beyond hope. But this guy really brought them out, and he taught them how to do different things. He taught them how to play chess. He taught them how to restore furniture. He even taught them how to work on electronics or appliances. And he was so good at his job that one day, a young boy, so good, he walks into the shop. Under one arm is a broken toaster, and under the other arm is a loaf of bread. He knew he was going to fix this thing, and then he was going to have toast. He knew that he could do it because this man so inspired him to restore that which was broken. And you and I, we are a picture of that. Remember, we talked about my old 1968 Chevy Camaro. I showed you a couple pictures about what it used to look like and then what it eventually looked at. And we saw inside of that story sort of what God does for us. So I want to give you a visual, okay? So in 2 minutes and 14 seconds, I want you to watch the restoration of a muscle car. Check this out. Oops. So there you go. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, right? It just took so short a time to restore a vehicle like that. And when you watch that, you think, hey, that looks pretty easy. I mean, in 2.5 minutes, that's a piece of cake. But did you notice how fast we had to make that and how much they had to do and how long it actually took? The restoration process is about tearing things apart, removing things that don't belong, adding things that do, enhancing things that already exist, and making something out of a piece of junk. And a beautiful picture comes after that. Well, we are called to be restored. You and I are called to that, and this is what God does. And our desire is to watch God take broken people and restore them. To see God take broken relationships and reconcile them. To watch God take sinful people and sanctify them. You know, just becoming a Christian is only the beginning. There's so much more to it. That God has a plan to recreate you in His image. And it's going to take the rest of your life to get there. But it's going to be a wonderful journey. And that is His desire. But it's up to you, really. How sanctified do you want to become? How set apart do you want to be? How transformed into His image do you want to be? What would you submit to Him to allow that to happen? I want to read a passage of Scripture that will really springboard us into it, but I want you to understand that Scripture teaches us that it is God's will that you would continue to grow in this grace that you've been given. So Ephesians chapter 3, Paul says this. He says, "For this reason, I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named, that according to the riches of His glory, He may grant you to be strengthened with power through His Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love." Can I just stop there for a second? That you would be rooted and grounded. That something begins to grow in you. That you are rooted deep and you stand strong. I read this little piece from a science writer named Hope Jaron this week. She talks about some facts about plants, how a tiny seed starts to put down roots, and that the most essential thing for a plant's survival are those roots. And this is what she says: "No risk is more terrifying than that is taken by the first root. A lucky root will eventually find water, but its first job is to anchor. Once the first root is extended, the plant will never again enjoy any hope of relocating to a place less cold, less dry, less dangerous. Indeed, it will face frost, drought, and greedy jaws without any possibility of flight. But if the seed takes root, it can go down 12, 30, 40 yards. The results are powerful. The tree's roots can swell and split bedrock and move gallons of water daily for years, much more efficiently than any pump yet invented by man. If the root takes hold, then the plant becomes all but indestructible. Tear apart everything above ground, everything. And most plants can still grow rebelliously back from just one intact root." Have you ever planted a shrub? You put it in the ground and you water it, and you come back in a week and you pull it out. Well, maybe. It'd be pretty simple, wouldn't it? It hasn't taken root yet, but leave it there 2 weeks or a month or a year or 10 years. And then it takes a bulldozer to get that thing out. It takes a backhoe to dig that out because it is rooted and it is strong. And Paul is saying to you and me, my desire is that you would be rooted deep, that they can cut everything off of you, but you will still begin and continue to grow. So that is his prayer for you. We continue. That you would be rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. And now this great doxology. Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all we ask or think, according to the power at work within us. To him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen. God is asking you to join him in this incredible process of sanctification. So what does it take? And what is the goal? I mean, for every one of us, we just had these babies up here a few minutes ago, right? And what's the goal for those babies? To grow up and to leave. I mean, that's the goal. It doesn't seem like it, but that is why you had them, to raise them up so that they would be productive adults. And isn't it fun to watch them grow? Isn't it fun to watch them lay on their belly and roll over to their back, and then lay on their back and roll over to their belly, and eventually begin to rock back and forth, and then crawl and grab onto things and hold on, and then they begin to walk, and we die a little bit with them when they walk like that, and when they fall, we laugh with them, and we pick them up, and we do it again, and when they eventually, make it all the way to us, we hug them, and we're all happy. It's really amazing to watch a baby grow. And as they get older, they become more dexterous. They can do more things, or dexterous. I'm trying to be smarter than I am. I'm not sure what that means. We're trying to raise them so that they become independent, and eventually they walk really nice, and they start to run, and they can do things that maybe we can't even do. And we see them grow, and we cheer them on. If we see a baby that's struggling, we encourage them. But if you see a 35-year-old man staggering, something's happened, right? He got into Uncle Fred's liquor cabinet probably, and he's doing something he shouldn't have done. Something's not right if an adult isn't walking, if an adult isn't producing. And for those of us who've known Christ for any time, there ought to be signs that we continue to grow in our faith. And I think the Bible makes its case very clear. It says several things, and I just want to read a few passages to you that will help to build this case. 1 Peter 2:2 says this: like newborn babies, long for the sincere milk of the word, so that by it you may grow in respect to your salvation. Another great verse is in Hebrews. Therefore, leaving the elementary teachings about Christ, let us press on towards maturity. Grow up. Colossians 2:6-7. Therefore, as you have received Christ Jesus as Lord, so walk in him, having been firmly rooted and now being built up and established in your faith, just as you were instructed, and overflowing with gratitude. Couple more. But grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. To him be glory both now and forever, and to eternity. Amen. And one more. Listen to this. Take pains with these things. Be absorbed in them so that your progress will be evident to all. There is something that in Scripture is telling us that it is absolutely natural that you would grow from infancy to childhood to maturity. That's sanctification, and that is our goal. So if I could as quickly as I can, I'd just like to throw out 4 phrases that have sort of come to my mind this week that I believe are necessary to think about when it comes to sanctification. Are you ready? Wow. Let's just pray and go home. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to go. I don't care. Here we go. Here's the first thing that you've got to think about is that, first of all, you've got to love this. Now, you may not understand this. This really was the whole beginning thought in my whole message. You've got to love this. What does that mean? Let me explain. I played football with a guy named Kevin James, not King of Queens Kevin James, but Kevin James, a different guy. And Kevin was our real team leader. And before practice every day, we would go to our different, spots, like the linebackers would be over here, the linemen would be over here, the defensive backs over here, and so on. And in our group, Kevin was our leader. And Kevin would say over and over and over to us, he'd say, guys, you gotta love this. And I think what Kevin was saying was, I love this. I love football. I love that I'm here. I get to participate. I get to hit people. This is great. I love this. And then he was saying to me, who wasn't so in love with the idea, you've got to love this. Because if you don't, then what our coaches are going to put us through, what the other team is going to try to do is not going to be a lot of fun. We are going to have to take some steps that are going to make us better, but it's going to be hard. And if you don't love this, then you're going to dread this. And Kevin is saying, learn to love it, guys. Learn to love it. This is an amazing opportunity that we have been given. And for you and for me, when it comes to the gospel, when it comes to sanctification, when it comes to walking with Jesus, you've got to love this. Love what? Love what happened to you. Preach the gospel to yourself every day. Go back again and again and again to the cross, to the empty tomb, to the victory that we have in Jesus. Understand what has happened to you as a believer, that you've been transformed from death to life, from prisoner to set free, from alien to citizen, from orphan to son, that I've been adopted into a family. My sins have been forgiven. I have heaven that's waiting for me. I have opportunities to serve. And it all started at the cross, and it ended at the resurrection. And it goes on actually from there. And you and I, we need to go back again and again and again to remember just what happened to you when you were saved. And you need to be in awe of that moment. Karl Barth tells a story about a man who many years ago was crossing into a town in the dead of winter, and he was going in this journey. And as he journeyed, he saw the village up ahead. And eventually he got to the village. What he didn't know was, as he was going, as he was crossing over a frozen lake, he had no idea that under him was water that could have killed him if he had fallen through. And he gets there, and somebody says to him in the morning, do you have any idea what you've just done? And he turned around and he looked, and he saw this frozen lake out there, and he just fell to his knees in horror. I could have died there. Do you know who you were and the position you were apart from Jesus Christ? I'm a big fan of Jonathan Edwards. One of the most famous sermons that's ever been preached is Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And in one of this sermon, he says something, and I'll paraphrase, but something like, men walk over hell, over rotten wood. That every step that they take apart from Christ could break through and send them to a Christless eternity. And they're walking over these planks, and they don't even know it. So did we. If somebody didn't come to us and share this good news, and that ought to blow your mind. You've been saved from something preach the gospel all the time to yourself. I love the song, When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. Can I just read some of the lyrics? This takes me back. It takes me where I need to be. It says, when I survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gains I count but loss and pour contempt on all my pride. Forbid it, Lord, that I should boast, save in the death of Christ my God. All the vain things that charm me most, I sacrifice them to his blood. See, from his head, from his hands, from his feet, sorrow and love flow mingled down. Did ever such love and sorrow meet, or thorns compose so rich a crown? Were the whole realm of nature mine, that were an offering far too small, love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all. What is he saying? He's saying, if I owned everything that was able to be owned, if I had everything that nature could provide, that wouldn't be enough to pay back what Jesus has done for me. I don't have it within me to pay him back. There's nothing that I have to pay him back. All I can do is worship him and thank him and be grateful. I love the gospel. I love that Jesus did this for me. And we must, before we start talking about what do we do in response, we've got to stay there. We've got to be rooted there. Remember the gospel, and anything we do from there will be simply saying, thank you, Lord, for what you did for me. To quote Tozer, and the knowledge of the holy, this is so good, listen closely. If some watcher or holy one, an angel, who has spent his glad centuries by the sea of fire, heaven, were to come down to the earth, listen, how meaningless to him would be the ceaseless chatter of the busy tribes of men. How strange to him and how empty would sound the flat, stale, and profitless words heard in the average pulpit from week to week. And were such a person to speak on earth, would he not speak of God? Would he not charm and fascinate his hearers with rapturous descriptions of the Godhead? And after hearing him, could we ever consent to listen to anything less than theology, than doctrine? That's pretty cool to me. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's amazing. Then he says, would we not thereafter demand of those who presume to teach us that they speak to us from the mount of divine vision, or remain silent altogether? If this is true, this is what we talk about. This is what we get excited about. This is what we revel in. This is what we allow to own us. Dwight Moody is an evangelist from another century, but a great godly man. And Moody preached all over the world. He went to England one time, and those English preachers were jealous of Moody for coming to London. And one of the preachers said, "What's the deal with Moody? Does he think that he has a monopoly on God?" And one of the wise preachers looked at him and says, "Oh no. But God has a monopoly on Moody. God owns that guy, and you can tell. Does God have a monopoly on you? If he does, now listen, if he does, he can ask you anything. He can demand of you anything. He can allow you to suffer anything. And if I understand that, then my whole worldview comes into focus incredibly clearly. We've got to love it. That is the first step in sanctification, is going back again and again and again to the gospel. Next, I think if we do love it, then we've got to let some things go. And if that's true that God has a monopoly on us, then wouldn't we gladly say, Lord, whatever, I will surrender anything for you. I think this is the problem with the American culture right now, is we like a little bit of God. We like to put him on like a suit and take him off when we're done with him. We don't allow him to absolutely penetrate every fiber of our being. We're looking at other things that eventually aren't going to satisfy. It's amazing to me. We find this even in Scripture. If you look at Ecclesiastes 2, one of the richest and most wise man who ever lived writes this. Ecclesiastes is written from a very worldly perspective. And this rich, wise man wrote this. See if this doesn't align with your life. He said, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the sun during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also earned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delight of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was my reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hand had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Now, what he did was fine. There was nothing wrong with that for the most part. But what he did is he made that his God. He made that to somehow try to fulfill the longing inside of him that couldn't be fulfilled. And he even wrote later in this chapter, he said, God has placed eternity in the hearts of man, and it frustrates them. There's a God-shaped hole in all of us, Pascal said. And what we do is we try to fill that God-shaped hole with everything that Solomon wrote about. Imagine a bucket, a massive, massive bucket. Bucket is so big that you could take the Atlantic Ocean, and if you could, you pour the Atlantic Ocean into this bucket. And look at the bottom of that bucket, the Atlantic Ocean. It didn't even cover the whole of the bottom of the bucket. This is your soul that only God can fill. And we try so hard to fill it with other things, and it ends empty, meaningless, all is meaningless. We've got to love this gospel, and we've got to let go of some things that don't matter. Paul talked about this in Philippians, remember? He talked about how if there's anybody in the world that can brag about what he is and what he's become and what he's attained, it would be him. And he gives this laundry list of everything that he is. And then he says this, but was that whatever was to my gain, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Jesus Christ, my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them garbage. That's a very vulgar word in the Greek, skubalon, that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ, the righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. that God says to us, stop trying to fulfill yourself with that which isn't going to fill you. If you go back to the gospel and you see what he's done, then there's nothing that God couldn't say, can you release that to me, that we wouldn't release to him. So we've got to love this. And we've got to be willing to let go. And thirdly, I would say that we've got to listen up. We've got to spend time hearing from him. You know, that's the cool thing to me about this demoniac, is when he was set free by Jesus, where do we find him? Right next to Jesus. I just want to be with you, Jesus. I just want to hang out with you, Jesus. And Jesus gets up and he goes to his boat. And what does this guy do? He follows him to the boat. He's going to get in the boat with Jesus. I want to go where you want to go, Jesus. That should be our desire. Lord, I just want to be where you are. I just want to hear from you. I want to listen to you. I want to spend my days thinking about you. Because here's the thing, guys, becoming like Jesus requires being with Jesus. Becoming like Jesus requires being with him. And shouldn't that be your desire? The one who set you free? He says, will you come hang out with me? And remember I said last week that if you were to go around that campfire and you would have saw the man who had been possessed by a demon, you would have seen a massive smile on his face. He'd been set free and he was smiling from ear to ear. But guess what? So was Jesus. Jesus was happy to be in his presence. Does it ever occur to you that Jesus likes to be with you too? That he enjoys the fellowship? He doesn't need it. You don't impress him in any way. But he loves to be with you. And we ought to want to be with him as well. So what do we do? Well, let me suggest a few things, okay? And these are my suggestions. And this list is not exhaustive at all. But I would encourage you to practice the presence of God. That you would do what you can to stand in his presence. Because God has said to you, you have everything at your disposal for a life of godliness. He gave you the Spirit. It's living inside of you. All you have to do is tap into that. You have everything that's needed. It's like a seed. Everything in that seed is there to grow whatever it is that's there. It's like a box, a puzzle box. You open the puzzle box, every piece is there, at least you hope. You just have to put it together. It's all there. We have what we need for godliness. Now we just need to work out our salvation. Everything's included. So when I say this, I want you to hear this, okay? I don't want you to hear tasks, do this. But what I want you to hear is, here are some tools that you can use to further your relationship. I don't want you ever to hear from this pulpit that we're going to say, try harder, be good, that somehow we're asking you to transform yourself. You can't do it. But the power of Jesus Christ living in you and you submitting to him and the tools that he's made available to you can help you to grow. So these are just mine. I'm going to let you borrow them. You need to return them, okay? But this is what I would do. This is what helps me. In my walk with Jesus, these are things that help me, and believe me, they help me. I can testify to you that these things are rich for me. First of all, I would say fellowship with other believers. Do you have somebody that you rub shoulders with who believes the way that you do? That loves Jesus the way that you do, maybe even loves him more than you do? You have somebody that sharpens you like iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Do you have somebody that would hold you accountable to this? Say, hey, you're not walking the way you say you want to. And I just want to hold you accountable. Do you have somebody that's going to love you, that's going to push you, that's going to pull you, that's going to make you the man or woman of God that God has called you to be? I love Good Soil Ministry because of what it says, and I've believed this for a long time. And they say this, that every person, talking about men, but women too, everybody needs a Paul Everybody needs a Barnabas, and everybody needs a Timothy in their life. Everybody needs somebody like Paul in their life who knows more, who's lived longer, who has more experience, who's a little bit more godly than they are, that they can be an example and show the way. And everybody needs a Barnabas who's going to just encourage you and see you for who you are and go, you're such an idiot, but let's just grow together. You need somebody that's got your back, that's encouraging, don't you? And you need somebody like a Timothy who you are a little further than. And you can say, come on, let's move a little closer to Jesus together. To me, this has been life transformational. When I came into ministry, I was a young guy, and I was able to have somebody pour into me. I had a great pastor. I had men friends, Carl Ball and John Devine. They were that to me. And I would sit around kind of like at their feet, listening to their wisdom because I was an idiot. And I just listened and I grew. And it was good. Do you have somebody like that? Do you have somebody that you would invest in, that they might invest in you as well? So fellowship is huge. Prayer is another one. You know, I've said if I come into the building and I take a left and I make it down to this altar on my knees, my whole day is different. If my posture is humble before God and I'm speaking to Him and I'm saying, Lord, here I am. Here's what's ahead of me. I need you so desperately. Here's my burdens. Here's my thankfulness. Here's what I praise you for. There's something about communing with God, you speaking to Him, that is life transformational. So do you pray? Next would be reading the scriptures, opening God's word and seeing what it has to say. I've said this before, but really the secret to success is a nook and a book. It's a lamp and the word. It's sitting down at a specific place at a specific time, opening that word and letting God speak to you through His word. Colossians 3:16 says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Just read it. Let it wash over you. Let it do its work. Next, I would say worship. And when I say worship, I mean specifically singing to God. I'm different. I know. I'm weird. I like to sing. I'm terrible at it, but I love to sing and I love to listen to people sing. I love to hear you worship God with me. But I love to be alone in this place when nobody's here and all the lights are off and I can just raise my hands, not worrying about what anybody else is going to think, and worship God. I like to walk and have my earbuds in and listen to music that honors Him. It does something to my heart. You can see that in the Old Testament, in the life of Elisha, in the life of Saul and David, that God uses music, He uses worship. And really beyond that would be maybe solitude. You know, we like to have noise, don't we? I sleep with a fan on because I don't like silence. But to get away and to have everything turned off and just to let God speak, to hear the beating of your heart, to just be quiet, to be still and know that He is God. And then lastly on my list would be ministry, service, serving one another. Getting your eyes off of yourself and on somebody who's hurting, who's needy, who is in need of your touch, in need of your words. It does amazing things for your walk. Do you serve anywhere? Are you ministering to anybody? If you are, I would guess that you're probably growing in your faith. Now that's just a short list. There's probably more, and you can add to it, but those are what helps me. So we know we've got to love it, right? We know we've got to let go of some things. We know we've got to listen up. What's the last thing? This is so important. And the last thing to me would be you've got to lean in. You've got to be able to trust God with what He's asking you to do, if I believe the gospel, if I believe in the sovereignty of God, if I believe that God is working for my good and for His glory, if I believe that He saved my soul, He's got a part for me in heaven, that I will live forever someday, then can I trust Him with this life? Can I trust Him with the things that He allows to come into my life? Whether it's good or bad or ugly. Sometimes God sends us things that He doesn't ordain of Himself, but He allows it to happen. But know that it came through Him. He still loves you. Sometimes He sends things our way so that we'll trust Him in the storm. But when God allows a difficulty to come your way, understand this, Christian, is God is shaping you. God is forming you into His image. He's making you the way He wants you to be. Jeremiah said, you don't hear the clay saying to the potter, what are you doing to me? How come you're pinching there and pushing there and pulling out there and punching there? Come on, this hurts. You never hear the clay say that, do you? The clay may be thinking it, I doubt it, but it could be. And sometimes you feel like that clay, don't you? Oh God, you're hurting here. This is painful. Stop it already. No more, no more, no more. And God is saying, I'm working on you. I'm not finished with you yet. And He says in His word in James 1, consider it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. Now listen to this. He says, and let endurance have its perfect results. Allow this to do what it's ordained to do. Let the pain work. Let the suffering work. Let the silence work. Let the hardship work. God hasn't abandoned you. He's right here with you. Romans 5, 3 through 4 says, and not only this, but we also exult in our tribulations, knowing that tribulation brings about perseverance, and perseverance, proven character, and proven character, hope. I'm going to stand before God someday, and He's going to go, hey, nice job. I allowed that into your life. And you, like Job, said, even if He slays me, I will still praise Him. God, I trust you. I don't know who it was that said, but you've heard it said before, when you can't trace God's hand, trust His heart, that He knows what He's doing. And Paul maybe said it better than anybody else. He said, I want to know Christ. Yes, to know the power of His resurrection and participation in His suffering, becoming like Him in His death, and so somehow to attain to the resurrection from the dead. You want to know God? You will find Him in suffering. C.S. Lewis said this, that God whispers in our pleasure, but He shouts in our pain. God is interested in speaking. He's doing a work, and He's not finished yet. I remember a few years ago, Tammy Constable shared a story that has always echoed in my brain. It was about a couple ladies that were doing a Bible study, and they were reading from a passage of Scripture in Malachi. And in Malachi it said this, and He shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. And they began to ask themselves, what's it like? How is God like a purifier of silver? What can we learn from this person who's purifying silver? And as luck would have it, she actually found somebody that did that. And she went to his place and saw the massive oven and the crucible and asked if she could be given a lesson in what he does and if he could share, why he does what he does. And so she was invited into the shop, and he put the crucible into that that blast furnace and watched that silver begin to melt down, and he scraped the dross off, and he scraped the dross off, and he kept his eye on the silver. And the lady's like, how do you know when it's ready? Can you leave it in there too long? He said, yeah. Well, how do you know it's ready then? And he said this. He said, I know the silver is purified when I can see my face in it. Inside of this purification process, inside of what God is doing in your life, he says this, I'll know I'm finished with you when I can see my reflection in you. Now, can he see his reflection in you right now? You have more dross to be taken off, more heat to be brought. Know that he's working for his glory and your good. And there's coming a day when his work will be accomplished. And you'll stand before him complete. He who began a good work in you will bring it to completion. He's not done with you yet. But let's be a place that continues to be refined, that continues to be sanctified, and a place that welcomes others who are interested in the same thing. Let's not only rescue, let's restore. Let's bring one another along in our walk so that someday we will be glowing and everybody will see who we are in Jesus Christ. Okay? Thanks, Lord, for your word. It's such a powerful challenge. And Lord, I hesitate to even pray a prayer like that, where I would say, Lord, I am so fired up about the gospel. Thank you so much for what you did, Lord. I mean that. Thank you for becoming sin on my behalf so that I would become the righteousness of God. That when God the Father looks at me, he sees an absolute perfect specimen. Lord, if there's anything in my life that I just need to relinquish to you, just to let go, that I'm holding on to, that is hindering my growth, may I do that. May it be like the runner who strips off everything that would hinder him and the sin that would so easily entangle him, and run with perseverance the race set before him, looking unto Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and is sat down at the right hand of the Father. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, that you will not grow weary and lose heart. May we be like that. Help us to get our eyes on you, to let go of those things that would hinder us, Lord. And Lord, I pray that we'd listen up. Speak to us, God. Speak to us in the silence. Speak to us in the suffering. Speak to us in the celebrating, in the worshiping, in the pleasure that you bring to us. Speak to our hearts. Oh God, may we pursue you. Not because we're obligated to, but because we want to. We just want to be with you. Oh God, may this message not be something that lays a burden on somebody, but that lifts one. That when we're in love with you, that there is a pleasure in pursuing you. And Lord, if there are things that you still need to scrape away at us, I say this very carefully, but Lord, have your way. Send whatever it is that would make me more like you. I am open to that. And Lord, I pray that this congregation would be too. We want to be like you. Someday we'll experience the power of your resurrection. But in the meantime, we may have fellowship in our suffering. But we love you, Jesus, and thank you that you do give us strength. I can testify to that fact. And you are faithful in all circumstances. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.